Good morning, doctor. Welcome back.
Good morning, Venkatesh. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, I'll just spend a minute to introduce the topic and then hand over to you. Yeah.
Right, right.
So today's topic is fear of the unknown. It's a topic that deals with something that's in all our lives. We all have unknowns. It results in fear of unknown, and that in some ways causes a constant psychological stressor in all our minds, which, if we don't know how to handle, is a serious impediment to our health and well-being. And it is in that context that it's part of this series on wellness is effectively all about balance. Yeah, over to you, doctor.
Yeah. Thank you, Venkatesh. So today's topic is an interesting one.
Yeah.
And almost all of us face this fear of unknown at least once or twice a day.
Right.
Because if everything is known, it can become a bit boring and then that also will lose its charm. And if everything is unknown, again, there is the other extreme. So one should have a balance of the known and the unknown.
Right.
It may sound a little academic, but it is required
Right.
because when we move along with our daily life, at least 50 to 60% of whatever is in our field of vision or field of consciousness, is unknown.
Correct.
So you don't know where you are going in terms of academics, your background, your family relationships, etc., etc.
Right.
Not everything is predictable. No, known and predictability is something that doesn't come too easily, but then we have to keep handling it as we go along.
Right.
And as we do that, we have a lurking fear of what is going to happen to us next. Yeah. And that is where the fear of the unknown comes. And the proportion of the unknown versus known will keep oscillating or keep changing. And we should learn to have a balancing approach there. So the fear of the unknown and the known must be balanced out, if we can say so. And basically, this fear is like any other fear.
Right.
So let's get to know what exactly is this fear thing that our mind handles.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at that. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Yes.
So next slide, please.
I have moved to the next slide. Can you see it?
Yeah, but I'm moving. Yeah, that's right. So we looked at the general aspects of the fear of the unknown. Let's move on. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Now, to begin with, to say there is a fear of the unknown, the closest and the easiest example is darkness.
Correct.
Yeah. We are in a dark room, completely dark room, like the photographic developers will be there. Today in the digital era, there is no dark room, but in the photographic era, there used to be a dark room where it is pitch dark. And in the pitch dark, we know that the darkness is because of photographic chemical processing. But otherwise, you're left confused and perplexed, So we fear the dark.
Right.
And the child example, the fear of the darkness is more and more pronounced in a child.
Correct.
And as we grow up, it sort of lessens, it gets reduced.
Right.
And you should learn to live with that fear and then gradually eliminate that fear as we go along. Correct. So that is how the darkness mechanism operates in our brain.
Right.
Next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah, comments, Venkatesh?
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting that you chose that example of darkness because that's one of the most hardwired, if you can call it, primordial instincts that we have, that darkness means unknown. And it is to that extent that we find just simply that's the best example, an early example of how we fear the unknown automatically. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So the first reaction to darkness, utter darkness, pitch dark, black darkness is we don't know where we are, facing west or north or east or whatever. And in that case, we try to produce some signal to ourselves, and that is a whistling. So whistling in the dark is a well-known response to darkness, where you have zero idea of the direction or what is happening. So this is true, particularly in villages, where there is no real light anywhere, and then you are proceeding somewhere, and you have to create some light, some input. Some input has to be created, and that is a whistling part. So
Correct.
whistling in the dark is a primordial response to darkness. Yeah, any queries?
No, I find very interesting the fact that if there is a vacuum of input,
Yeah,
you generate one for yourself, right? And use
right,
that as your crutch to move on. But it's a very legitimate and positive way to deal with it.
right, right. Next slide, please.
Yeah,
The opposite of this, whatever we have seen so far, is fool's paradise, where you have got inputs, inputs which are not very positive, not encouraging, but still you create some kind of encouragement of your own by assuming that you are in a fool's paradise. It may sound a little paradoxical,
yeah,
but you create just like we saw in whistling sound, you create, or some loud noise we create to tackle the darkness and the day. So this in fool's paradise, we know that there are a lot of things negative around us,
right.
but still we choose to believe that things are good,
Correct.
and that is fool's paradise. And this is the psychological phenomenon similar to the one we saw earlier.
Right.
So if something is looking terrible and bad, then you create a fool's paradise and live within that paradise, or else you go further mad. So it's not too much of psychology, I hope. But
No,
fool's
I
paradise,
think it's a very important point you're making, Doc, because you need something to grapple with that fear of unknown or the negatives, and
right,
this is why it's all about balance. To a certain extent, creating self-soothing or needing that reassurance is fine, but if you take it to the extreme where you just deny that there is anything negative and you deny that there is any legitimate reason to be afraid, once again you are out of balance, and once again you are going to have a problem.
right, very true. So fool's paradise is also required, without which we cannot live.
It's an extreme form of self assurance or self reassurance, and that also doesn't make sense. Correct.
Right. So next slide, please.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, you require some courage.
Yeah.
You require some courage to live the next moment, next month, next year, whatever. And you have to keep going with the will of the courage. And the courage again will have to be generated by you.
Correct.
Just like we saw generated by you in the, as we whistle along in the darkness.
Correct.
Or we have everything going hopeless, but then you create something through courage. And then that courage is created through faith. And that we'll see the faith that we need to go on a daily basis.
Right.
And the faith we need to go on a long-term, deeper sense.
Correct.
Everything will have to be generated with faith. And this is where the divine inputs of faith, divine outputs of faith and divine inputs of faith matter. Right. And this is where many atheists clash with each other. People say that, you are living in a fool's paradise, or you are just imagining things, etc., etc. Right. And courage comes through the faith that again you generate yourself, mind you. All this is generated within us.
Correct.
That's very interesting. So if you have more faith, you have more courage. Correct. That's the reason why we have thousands and thousands of devotees and followers of various religions and so forth. Correct. And that faith is required, or else again we cannot survive. Any comment, Venkatesh?
No. Perfect. Fascinating, in fact, that faith is sort of an essential part of our toolkit to deal with the world. And it's impossible to have courage without faith in something. And what that faith is, you have to decide. Yeah. And fascinating, Doctor. Fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this courage and faith appear in the logo or motto of Annamalai University, where I was born.
Wow.
The was with courage and faith.
Right.
And in life, you see that courage is not just like that. It doesn't generate by itself. You have to add the fuel of faith. Okay, that sounds a little paradoxical again. You create your faith and you create your courage.
Correct.
So
Without that faith,
ultimately,
you can't. Yeah. And this
yeah,
also brings to mind an interesting definition of faith, which is faith is belief without proof. Because if it was belief with proof, then there is no concept of faith, because then it's a fact.
correct. Very true, very true. So that is where the fear of the unknown also comes in. Yeah. Now, how do you deal with this?
Right.
You see the picture of Arjuna in Mahabharata.
Right.
The beginning of the 18th chapters of
The
Bhagavad Gita.
Right.
This is Bhagavad Gita's background is such that here is a guy, here is Arjuna, who is a hero, really real hero physically and psychologically and otherwise also. He is a hero.
Right.
He was a
Right.
But he lost all that heroism when he got scared. Yeah. I normally give the example of somebody facing literally like a goat going to the slaughterhouse.
Right.
You are worried and you are literally done to death even before the death happens.
Correct.
So that kind of state of mind is what is called as Arjuna mindset in Mahabharata.
Right.
In Bhagavad Gita and Arjuna, the so-called Arjuna mindset is you are facing an army, a mega army of all friends and relatives.
Correct.
Mind you, you are not facing any enemy as such. All the fellows who are facing you in the war field, is again your own cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts and your own people.
Correct.
And still you are scared. And
Right.
still you cannot manage yourself. This is again a paradox.
Correct.
So Arjuna didn't know how to deal with the situation because he was facing all brothers and sisters and aunts, uncles.
Right.
And he was on the one hand feeling that he should not kill them, and on the other hand, he has to kill them to survive himself. Yeah.
Correct.
That is when Krishna told him. And so Arjuna at that time lost all hope and he was so confused. He didn't know what he was saying or doing.
Correct.
He simply put down the bow and arrow and he said, I'm not going to fight this war.
Right.
Fighting this war has no meaning. It is not required and it is only harming me. So I am not going to fight this war. And he took his bow and arrow and put it on the ground. Okay. And just waited for Krishna to guide him.
Correct.
So that Krishna said, my dear Arjuna, you are scared. You are afraid. You are afraid of what is going to happen to you. You are scared. You are just afraid.
Correct.
Arjuna said, no, I am not scared. This is a denial thing. First thing is, he is denying that he is not scared.
Correct.
And if he is scared, what is the reason for being scared?
Correct.
The reason is that Arjuna believes that he is going to kill all the relatives and brothers. And he is believing that it may not happen. And Krishna had to come to his rescue and say, my dear Arjuna, you are a fool. What is the guarantee that you will kill them? They will kill you with the first arrow.
Correct.
And Arjuna didn't know what to do. So that was the time when Krishna said, look, your job is on the battlefield. Your job is to take the bow and arrow and shoot the first arrow.
Right.
So that you have some sense of action.
Correct.
And the action that you require to do is the war.
Correct.
The war, you cannot sit and philosophize or theorize. The war, you have to fight the war. And fighting the war again has to be without any approach or understanding of what is going to happen, except to indulge in karma. Fighting the war is a karma. And the biggest example of karma is Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna guided him to action.
Correct.
So you should know to stay focused on action. You stay focused on the bow and arrow. You stay focused on the enemy, and you forget who is your brother, sister-in-law, or what. Why should you kill? Why should you not kill? And all the polemics and arguments will not hold good. Here you are in the battlefield. You lift the bow and arrow and shoot the first arrow, and you have started your karma in this chapter. So this is a very profound degree of philosophy. Absolutely. And very practical philosophy. If you are confused and if you are perplexed, the best thing is to start acting.
Correct. Correct.
In a positive sense, you start acting out your role in life. Right. Your role in the universe, you're given a job and you have to perform the job. So that is a Karmayoga that Krishna initiated in Arjuna. And for the remaining 18 chapters, it was simply Karmayoga and nothing else.
Correct.
Act, act, and act.
Correct.
And many of us forget that this is a very good advice, but we tend to forget that, what's the point in acting? Again, Arjuna mindset. Gradually, you have to outgrow that.
Correct.
It's not sounding too philosophical.
No,
It is
no. In
not.
fact, I think it's fascinating and really interesting in this context that the way you have laid it out, that fear is a given. Confusion and freezing in the face of fear. For example, last time also in the flight or fight, we talked about how that itself is a physical response. Without some kind of courage, you can't act. You need to act. You need to have faith in something. And the Gita gives you this very clear view that have faith in your duty, just do it and get to action. And it sort of closes the loop on how to manage yourself.
True, very true, very true. So,
yeah, this also, I think, all speaks to the larger point of why, when you talk about the fact that spiritualism is an essential part of wellness, and that without it there is no wellness. This sort of explains from first principles why. Yeah.
Right. So action. So next slide, please.
Yes. Another beautiful.
Here is Lord Hanuman. Yeah. We're trying to jump over the sea, and his colleagues didn't know what to do. And it so happened that they only had to jump over the sea to retrieve and to find Sita Mata.
Correct.
So they said they had reached the end of the land. It's literally the land's end that they had reached, starting from North India, Ayodhya and all that. They had traveled down south. Hanuman and his few colleagues, very few, handful of them, they were traveling down south, and then they reached the land's end. And there they didn't know what to do. There is a sea there. And how to cross the sea? There is no bridge, there is no nothing. So what do you do? Again, perplexed. You turn back and go to Rama and say, sorry, we couldn't find Sita. Or you say, somehow I will cross the sea. Then if you are going to cross the sea, how are you going to cross the sea? Etc. etc. Will it make sense at all? Will it be absurd to expect the monkeys to jump over the sea and then to reach Sitaji? So it was a time when
unknowns, just so many unknowns, right? How far is it? How much do you jump? Yeah, absolutely.
Everything is unknown. And if you see the Vanaras, the handful of Vanaras, they were standing there, perplexed, confused, and then they were ashamed to go back to Rama without anything. And then how could they jump over the sea because they didn't know how to swim, etc. So that was the time when some
Jambavan. Yes.
The sage Hanuman kind of a thing. Yes, he was a sage to Hanuman also.
Right.
He said, one of you will have to do it, and only Hanuman can do it. And Hanuman said, I am like any other monkeys that are standing here. I am just a monkey.
Right.
Jambavan said, you are not just a monkey, you are a monkey ordained, to cross the ocean and retrieve Sita and bring back the message. And you are the only one who could do it. Hanuman still didn't have the courage. Hanuman was not willing to jump over the sea at all. He had to be persuaded. And at the time of persuasion, somebody had to tell him, look, you have the powers. You have the powers to cross the ocean. And Hanuman said, I have no power, I am just another monkey. You see the contradiction there. But ultimately, he was coaxed into jumping over the sea. And this is history. But for that, Ramayana would not have been written. And Hanuman somehow took the courage, and Jambavan said, jump, come on, jump. And Hanuman was hesitating, like Arjuna hesitating with his bow and arrow. And he finally courage in his two hands and jumped. And that is the time, that's the beginning of a whole new chapter of Ramayana. And again, a lot of philosophy in terms of Karmayoga comes. Now, Hanuman could have fallen into the sea and drowned because he couldn't swim. But then with his courage, with his faith was what? Rama, Lord Rama in Ramayana. So that faith created the courage in his mind, and he was coaxed by Jambavans and others, Vibhishanas and stuff. Vibhishana, of course, came later. So these people were coaxing him they were giving him divine strength. You have to invoke the divinity inside you to gather that kind of strength. You say, I gathered all the strength in my might and then I did it.
Correct.
Karma. When you say I did it, I am doing it, this karma. Karmayoga of the unblemished magnitude and character is what you see in our mythology.
Yes.
And Hanuman is a really valid and inspiring example of the whole thing. Any comment, Venkatesh?
No, perfect, perfect. We need to find the Jambavan inside ourselves or find a Jambavan in our lives who will
Right.
give us that courage and help us move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. The next slide, please.
I think
So
you
basically,
talked to this. Yeah.
you have to invoke courage, and courage is energy.
Right.
You gather all your strength means what? You gather all your, whatever strength you have at your disposal, you gather it and invoke it in the form of a God or sort of God or representative of God, and then you perform. And 90%, 99% people, when they are confronted with unknown kind of situations, they invoke divine energy.
Right.
And this is what we see even in our daily life. You want to start a very tiring, formidable task, and you invoke energy. And the invocation of the energy today is basically Sri Ganesha.
Correct.
Ganesha was to invoke the energy within him, within us,
Correct.
and then perform and act. So Ganesha again is a Karma Yoga, culmination of Karma Yoga is Ganesha.
Correct.
Like that. Next slide, please. So here is another example from the Western civilization.
Right.
You see Mount Sinai and 10 Commandments.
Correct.
A similar situation existed there when the people had crossed over to the
Red
Mount
Sea.
side.
Yeah.
What is that?
Moses took his followers across the Red Sea. The sea parted for him.
Yeah. Moses was the ordained man, by divinity. Before Moses entered the picture and he went up the Mount Sinai, there was utter chaos.
Correct.
Palestine and other things were total chaos, and there was no family, no society, no nothing. Everything is anybody comes and does whatever he wants, and everybody was carrying on with it merrily. But then Moses said, "This cannot go on forever, and I am going to seek divine energy." See, look again, divine energy. Now, the courage that Moses displayed, which is still valid even now today. Item by item, he went about telling people, "You guys are fighting like dogs. You are idiots. You invoke divinity inside you." And he said, "I am going to Mount Sinai, to the top, and I'm going to ask God for guidance." Now, asking God for guidance, it may sound funny, but it is, again, invocation of divinity.
Correct.
And Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments that he came out with, a superb example of how focused energy can help you through situations. And when he came down, Moses came down from Sinai Mount, he was a different man.
Exactly.
He is an example for the whole world.
Correct.
And he succeeded. The important thing is, if you have unblemished courage, unblemished faith, you succeed. If you have doubts, if you are a doubting Thomas, whether it's going to work or not, it will never work. You have to say, it's going to work and I'm going to make it work. You can see the tennis players example.
You have to create that certainty through and create order in the chaos.
Right.
Which you can base only on faith. Absolutely.
Right.
Just a time check, Doc. I think we'll have maybe a few more minutes. So I'll move on to the next slide, if that's okay.
Yes, do that. Coming to the end anyway, more or less. Yeah.
Perfect.
So ultimately, the divinity inside you will give you the courage, okay, and pull you out of excuse me.
No.
If you are a coward, as it happened with Arjuna, and basically Arjuna covered, Arjuna was a coward. So that cowardice will have to be converted or metamorphosed into courage. And through courage is what? Through karma, through action.
And through action. Correct. Now, I think correct. It's also interesting that you say, coward. I think it's cowardice. And you can think Arjuna is in some ways a hero finally, because he overcame his cowardice and instilled courage in himself, or listened to what Krishna had to say. So all of us have cowardice. All of us have courage. We have to tap into the right one.
Right. Correct. Thank you, Venkatesh. So next slide, please.
Yeah.
There are parts of the brain which will keep coming back. Today may not be the time, we will be running out of time. Ultimately, fear is generated and felt inside the brain.
Correct.
Okay, and for which we have separate systems allotted. And there is something called limbic system, which helps you through the fear reaction, which ultimately can be converted into courage.
Correct.
So all that will have to be, maybe we'll see some other occasion on some other tutorial, different way of looking at fear and courage. How to make your fear convert itself into courage.
Right.
It is possible. It's within the brain. It is within ourselves. Again, philosophy. Your courage is within you, and your
Courage
power
is
of active courage is within you. And how to do that? We can look at it, very dispassionately. It is possible. How do you convert? How do you convert negativity into positivity?
Right.
Yeah. So we will look at it some other time. Next slide, please. So within this domain, we have something called phobia. You are mortally afraid of something,
right.
and the fear has no rationale. There is no real reason why you should feel the fear, but then you keep feeling the fear. That is called phobia. Next slide, please. And this phobia again will have to be converted into action through Karmayoga only. Now, phobia can be an excuse for you not to act, but
Correct.
the same phobia will have to coax you into action.
Correct.
And that action will have to be properly, divinely directed, and that phobia converted into action.
Correct.
Next slide, please. So whenever you have a fearful situation, you have to have a plan of action. The details of plan A and plan B we will see on some other occasion.
No, but
So
yes,
you have a plan of action. You have a plan of action, and then you have to have a plan B for your action to succeed. You cannot simply have one plan. So you have a plan A to plan B. That is again part of fear management. So that is where our actions eventually converge. Next slide, please. So we have seen this. So that brings us to the end of today's session.
Correct.
We have covered diverse aspects of the psychology of fear.
Correct.
And the theology of fear, if you like. And maybe you'll continue to do this as we keep going. See, in this series of our podcast, we are looking at behavioral aspects.
Correct.
We are behavioralists, if you like, in this series. And this will go on. And there is the unending scope for behavioral psychology, which you'll see later. Sigmund Freud started it, and then he was extremely good, really good observer,
Right.
a great observer. And he ended up with psychoanalysis.
Correct.
And all that is to be enacted through our own action, our own karma. Eventually, it is our karma, and karma. So that's where we are. Yes.
No,
I hope we
wonderful.
could.
I think this was a lovely session for me to hear you talk about, and sort of just as we summarize, that a very biological phenomenon, a very legitimate phenomenon of fear of the unknown, how there is no other way to deal with it except to, in some fashion or form, without you can't imagine your fears away completely. That would be fool's paradise. But in order to act, you need faith. And to have faith, you need to believe in something, and you need to believe that acting is better than not. And the Bhagavad Gita is a perfect example of that. You need to find the people in your life or inside yourself who can be the Jambavans, and have a plan A, plan B, which way it is, but keep acting, and that is what Karmayoga is. And I think this sort of explains beautifully why spiritualism is an essential part of wellness, and a very physical phenomenon still needs spirituality to deal with.
Good.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. Very enlightening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Yes. Yes. Yes.